Hello students, how are you? So in the previous video of the chapter respiration in organism, we discussed about breathing and cellular respiration. Okay, so I discussed this diagram with you. I hope it is clear. Let's take a quick look at it again. When we inhale the oxygen, that oxygen goes through the nasal passage and reaches the lungs. From there, the oxygen mixes with the blood, so that blood becomes oxygenated blood. Okay, yeah, or we can say it is oxygen rich blood. That oxygen rich blood, with the help of the blood vessels, reaches to different types of cells, or you can say tissues. There it is exchanged between the cell, so the oxygen is transferred into the cell, and the carbon dioxide that is present in the excess in the cell, it is transferred back to the blood. Okay, there already the food that has been stored is present. So the food in the presence of oxygen, or we can say what is the food, that is in the form of the glucose, C6H12O6, that is the food. It reacts with oxygen to give out carbon dioxide, water, and the most important thing, that is energy. Okay, so this is how breathing and cellular respiration are connected to each other. I told you breathing is just inhaling and exhalation, whereas cellular respiration is breaking of the food with the help of the oxygen. Okay, and if it is in the presence of oxygen, I told you it is aerobic respiration, and if it is in the absence of the oxygen, then it is anaerobic respiration. I told you what is the time or what is the place when the aerobic respiration takes place and the anaerobic respiration takes place. In human beings, both type of respiration takes place. In normal conditions, like for example, if you are sitting at the moment, you are not doing anything, you are just studying, so then the aerobic respiration is going on. The food present in the cells is being digested, and oxygen reacts with it and releases large amount of energy. But when you are doing certain exercises, I told you, for example, running, cycling, weightlifting, some heavy exercises, at that particular point of time, what happens? Anaerobic respiration takes place, because the amount of oxygen decreases. So the food at that point of time produces lactic acid, and that lactic acids accumulate in the muscles, which leads to the cramps. Okay, and then I told you what to do to cure those cramps, or you can say whatever the problem has been there. You can take a hot water bath or a massage for that time. What does that massage or a hot water bath do? It makes the flow of the blood proper. So once the flow of the blood becomes proper in the muscles, the oxygen starts reaching, then that lactic acid again broken down into carbon dioxide and water. Okay, so again like this the anaerobic respiration again converts to aerobic one. Okay, but it will only be done, or it will only happen when or once the oxygen availability is resumed or restored to normal condition. Okay students, so this was about the breathing and cellular respiration. I hope it is clear to all of you. Then the next one that we discussed, that why do we feel hungry after doing a physical activity? Then I told you, because at that time the food is getting consumed, and the oxygen, because it is reacting with the food, so hence all the food that gets consumed in generating the energy, we start feeling hungry. So in order to gain more energy, we need to eat more food. It is obviously at the time of physical activity like walking or running. Okay, because the cells have consumed the food, now cells will be requiring more food now for more amount of energy. That's why we feel hungry after doing a physical activity like walking or running. Next topic students is the mechanism of breathing in human beings. Before moving on to the mechanism, let's take a basic look at the human respiratory system. What does that human respiratory system consist of? First of all, it is the nasal passage, okay, and oral cavity is the cavity of the mouth. Okay, so nasal passage and oral cavity, you can see they have a common path, that is the pharynx. I hope it is visible in the diagram, that nasal passage and the oral cavity, you can see there is a common passage, pharynx. Then after that there is the division, means that common food, then there is a food pipe and the windpipe. Windpipe, or the other name of the windpipe, is the trachea, like the other name of the food pipe is esophagus. Okay, so similarly here the other name of the windpipe is trachea. From trachea there are lungs. Okay, and most importantly, these lungs, students, are covered with the rib cage. Because see why, like the organs like brain, lungs, these are covered inside these bony structures, skeleton. very important, because these are delicate organs and they need to be protected. For example, I say, what happens if lungs get damaged? Definitely breathing will affect, of breathing it will affect the oxygen reaching level, and it may result in the death of a person. Similarly, for example, brain, it is kept in a skull. A skull is a hard, very hard bone, very less number of joints, immovable joints that are present in the skull. So why is this that? Because brain is again the most delicate organ, and if there is a damage in the brain, then it is not curable. So to protect the brain from the damage, that's why these are protected in these skeletons. Okay. So then there is rib cage and lungs, and if you see the half side of the lung, that is open side, you can see there are various branchings. These branches are bronchi or bronchioles. Okay. And in the end part of the bronchioles, there are air sacs where this oxygen is mixed with the blood, because blood reaches the lungs, and with the help of the blood and where the capillaries are present, there the air sacs or the oxygen is exchanged, or carbon dioxide is exchanged. Okay. Because why I told you, because we have to study the mechanism of breathing, so we need to know what are the parts of the respiratory system. Okay. So nasal passage and the oral cavity, a common pathway there is pharynx. From pharynx, if we are talking about respiratory, so we need to discuss about only trachea. We don't need to talk about the oesophagus or the food pipe. Okay. Then trachea leads us to into the lungs. Into the lungs, they are bronchi, bronchioles. Finer dividing are bronchioles. Okay. Bronchi, then bronchioles, and then in the end there are air sacs where the oxygen get exchanged. Now what happens, let's see. We take in the air present in the environment through our nostrils, which travel through the nasal cavity. Then it moves through the windpipe and reaches the lungs. That's why I told you the diagram. Now if you imagine that diagram, so there is a nasal passage. With the help of that, the oxygen, or you can say the oxygen rich air, because see, the air we are inhaling, it has all the gases, but we inhale oxygen rich air. Okay. So oxygen rich air is there, oxygen is present, so it reaches to the lungs with the help of windpipe. Very important. I told you there is a common pathway, pharynx. Then after pharynx, there is that, you can see the trachea or the windpipe. Okay. Next point, the lungs are located in the chest cavity, which is surrounded by the ribs. On the floor of the chest cavity lays a muscle sheet called diaphragm. In that diagram, I forgot to mention about the diaphragm. You can see this one, the diaphragm. Okay. When we will be discussing the mechanism now, then this diaphragm has a very important role to play. We will be talking that it relaxes or it contracts to release or like pressure. Okay. So then because of that, the shape of the lungs also changes, and that creates high pressure and the low pressure region, and it helps in inhaling or exhaling of the air. Okay. So on the floor of the chest cavity lays a muscle sheet called diaphragm. Now during the breathing process, the movement of the ribs and diaphragm takes place. This is so because the lungs expand and contract during breathing. Okay. So I told you that during the breathing process, the movement of ribs and diaphragm takes place, and I told you just when we were looking at the diagram that this diaphragm relaxes or contracts. So this leads to the change in the shape of the lungs. Okay. As we take in the air, it fills up the lungs, and this moves the diaphragm downwards and the ribs outwards. Definitely, because when the air will enter the lungs, then the volume will increase. So that's why the diaphragm moves a little downwards and ribs outwards. So see, look at the significance of this movement. Ribs move outwards and the diaphragm moves downwards. So definitely there is an increase in the volume. It needs to be, because if lungs need to accumulate air, where the lungs will accumulate the air, it needs some volume, because we all know air occupies some volume. Okay. Yeah, we can say that it does not have a definite volume, but it has. Okay. So the diaphragm moves downwards and the ribs moves outwards. The lungs, when releasing out of the air from the body, bring back the diaphragm and the ribs to their original position. Means then the diaphragm again move upwards and the ribs inwards, because as the air exhales, the volume also needs to decrease. So that's why this movement is very important. I told you at the starting that this movement of diaphragm and the ribs is very important in the cases of inhalation and exhalation. Clear, students? So this is a compare. How? Take a look at it again. We take in the air present in the environment through our nostrils, which travels through the nasal cavity. Then it moves through the windpipe and reaches the lungs. The lungs are located in the chest cavity, which is surrounded by the ribs. On the floor of the chest cavity lays a muscle sheet called diaphragm. During breathing process, the movement of the ribs and the diaphragm takes place. This is so because the lungs expand and contract during breathing. As we take in the air, it fills up the lungs. This moves the diaphragm downwards and the ribs outwards. This point is very important, students. Okay, I'm again telling you because it can be asked that what happens to the position of diaphragm and ribs during the inhalation process. So you need to know that the diaphragm moves downwards and the ribs outwards, and when the air is releasing out from the body, at that time it brings back the diaphragm and ribs to their original position. Now this diagram will explain you the relaxed breathing. Relaxed breathing means when we are sitting or we are breathing normally, okay, without any pressure. You can say when forceful expiration or inhalation is not happening. Forceful means, like for example, when we are doing exercise, this is a forceful because we need more oxygen, so there is an extra amount. Relaxed breathing is in the normal state as you are sitting or doing some normal work at that time. Now during breathing in, air is inhaled. Now as the air will inhaled, the volume will increase definitely, and due to that increase in volume, that the chest, that region of that lung will need to accumulate that air, and so that for that it will increase the volume. So how it will increase the volume? See, the chest expands, means you can see the rib cage moves outwards as I told you, and the diaphragm contracts. Okay, so that's why that whole area expands, or you can say the abdomen expands. So what happens? That can accumulate the more air. This is during the process of breathing in. Okay, what happens during when we breathe out? You can see the air is exhaled. Now air is exhaled because that extra amount of air that was accumulated is being exhaled. So what happens? The volume is not required now, extra volume. So because the extra volume is not required, so the rib cage, or you can say the chest, reaches to original position, that is contracts, means move forward. Diaphragm relaxes, and because it relaxes, so it comes to its original form. You can say it is bend form. Okay, and in first diagram you can say it has been contracted, so it becomes straight like this. Okay, so that's why it comes downward, and you can see as soon as it contracts and it comes downward, you can see the chest lungs also move downward and becomes large. Okay, whereas in the second diagram you can see when it relaxes, it comes to its original position. Because of its coming into its original position, the chest contracts, and the volume of the chest, or you can say mainly lungs, decreases. So breathing is just because of the increase or decrease in the volume of the lungs. Okay, so these two diagrams explains how do we breathe in and breathe out with the help of chest, you can say ribs or the diaphragm, because and their basic movement. Okay, this diagram explains this. Next is, students, why do we sneeze? Let's discuss that. As we inhale the air present in the surroundings, sometimes various unwanted elements such as smoke and dust are also included in it. Okay, now we are talking about why do we sneeze. Okay, sneezes means like cheek aana. So why do we sneeze? As we inhale the air present in the surroundings, sometimes various unwanted elements such as smoke and dust are also included in it. However, they get stuck in the air in our nostrils, but some of them can get through the nasal cavity. They thus cause irritation in the nasal cavity, which makes us sneeze. Okay, because why does sneeze occur? Because of the irritation in the nasal cavity, and because of the sneeze, because it is very helpful. See how? Because it helps in getting rid of that unwanted particles out of the nasal cavity. See, unwanted means that are not for use of that are not used in respiration, that components. So if they will be going inside the lungs or nasal cavity, definitely they will be causing some irritation. So to remove those unwanted particles so that they do not hinder the respiration in any kind, they do not hinder the breathing in any kind, they are to be removed out. Or I can say they can also cause some disease also. If there are some microorganisms like bacteria and fungi, they can, because they are very microscopic, they are suspended in the air, so they can come inside our nasal pathway. Okay, so the sneeze, it helps us to getting the rid of unwanted particles. Okay, so that's why the sneeze, that phenomena of sneeze is very important. So I hope students it is clear to all of you. In the next video we'll be discussing about respiration in different types of organism. Okay, so this was one of the most important video, you can say, related to the respiration in organism. Okay, if you need to understand how the respiration or the mechanism of respiration, or I can say breathing, occurs in human beings, so you need to understand this better. Okay, the most important thing in the mechanism of breathing is the movement of the ribs and the you can say diaphragm. Okay, so you need to understand that well. If it is not clear to you, you can again watch the video, again go through that part, because again I'll say questions from that part are asked very frequently. Okay, maybe about the movement, maybe about the inhalation, maybe about the exhalation. So there are definite type of questions. Okay, in the next video we'll be continuing with the respiration in different kinds of organisms. Till then, students, you keep studying, stay inside our house and take care of yourselves. Okay, thank you and have a nice day.